Hello friends, good evening and welcome to the Friday webinar series based on the book Conversations with Yogananda. And today we are going to take up a very beautiful conversation. I think it was partially covered last time. It is conversation number 90. This conversation is highlighting the fact of compassion of the Master, and here the Master is Paramhansa Yogananda. And Swamiji writes that the Master was truly an embodiment of compassion. No matter how much anyone wronged him, he remained ever his spiritual friend. And no matter how far a disciple strayed from the path, he sought always to bring that person back to God. In the West, the word disciple suggests discipline, but in India, the word often used is chela, suggesting beloved son or daughter. There was one disciple to whom the Master gave a very serious warning. If you leave this life here, it will take you 200 more incarnations to return to it. The disciple, to his own great misfortune, did leave. Later, he returned for a visit. The Master said of him afterward, he sobbed before me. Why did I ever leave? The moods I had here were as nothing compared to what I have experienced since I left. On another occasion, the Master said, some people who leave here criticize us, reporting that we do not live the spiritual life. That's because they themselves did not live it. They spread evil gossip about us. Well, so long as they hold that attitude, I cannot help them. But if they leave and afterward come running to me for help, I do everything I can for them. It is not that I condone their delusion. I am, however, as the saying goes, in this for the long haul. So it's a big conversation, so I would like to take it in parts here. And one thing I think this conversation gives us this understanding, perhaps one thing which as a human being, which we can never be clear about is the compassion of a saint. As saints have said that in order to understand a saint, you need to be one, then only, and compassion is one such quality of a saint. We probably cannot understand the magnanimity of a compassion of a saint unless we become one to see how big is their heart. And in this conversation, Swamiji is highlighting that how Paramhansa Yogananda was also like that. And before that we go into it, I would just like to share with you that as a human being, we always try to see this world from our own perspective. And this is something, they say that if the way we look at the world, we also like to see the same way our own selves. And it often happens that as we are living in our separate individual reality, we often see people doing different kind of things, and one part of ourselves is always trying to see how people are conducting themselves, and in a way we are trying to judge things the way they are doing it. And as they say that when we judge others, we also judge in the same manner our own selves, and in the same manner we feel that the saints and the sages and God also is kind of judging our own selves. But that itself is a big fallacy, because just like in Bible, Christ has said that your ways are not my ways, your thoughts are not my thoughts, because God does not judge anyone. In fact, he loves everybody unconditionally. And in fact, Yogananda reminded his disciples many times that God never minds your faults, God only minds your indifference. And that's a very big and very simple way to look at it, because one of the greatest obstacle why people between themselves and God realization, and also sometimes why people sometimes feel like leaving the path, as it was happening in this case, was that people often go into guilt and shame, that I have done so many mistakes, or I have done so many bad things, and probably God will never forgive me, or my guru will never accept me. And those these things are nothing but a victory of the delusion, because that's how the delusion plays on in our mind. And in a way, there is nothing but our own mind is coming in between God and us, our own selves. Because when we think like that yes, we are creating a barrier, and in that barrier even our guru and God can also reach up to us, because we create a wall and they cannot help us. In fact, this is the only reason why master, in this case this disciple, was Boon, and he was thinking perhaps that he had made some mistakes and master will not forgive him, and that's the reason why he was he was falling from attunement, and he was leaving the path. And master reminded him that if at this stage you will leave, it will take you 200 more incarnations to come back again. But still, unfortunately, he could not stay on the path and left. Now this is something which is very unfortunate, but at the same time master said that disciples disciples for a master are nothing but their own children, because he is like a spiritual father to them. And at another place, he, in the same conversation, he says that, let us say that if a child falls from a roof of a house, and he says that if you are a father or a mother, if you see he's your own child and he falls, what will you do? You will just immediately rush and lift the child, and you will do whatever you can to help him. And that is exactly how saints and great masters see their own disciples when they are falling from the spiritual path. They immediately rush to help us. But then master said that if in their own delusion they start abusing the master or start shooting them, then what can a master do? Master said that in that case I have to just put my hands in my pocket and wait. And if at a later point, if the same disciple again comes back to master and asks for help, then he says that I just forget that that the disciple was that the disciple was going against him, and he just immediately forgets that, forgives him, and again comes to help such a disciple. Isn't this amazing? That how can a human mind can never fathom this depth of compassion. In fact, there was this incident of one of his own disciple. His name was Dhirananda, and this is also another story which master has shared in this conversation. Dhirananda was one of master's very good friend, and he was in fact his childhood friend. But as the destiny was unfolding, he was with master in US also, when he went to US for spreading teachings of yoga. But then in the initial days he was helping master, but yes, at some point the delusion started playing on in his mind, and he betrayed master. In fact, he betrayed to an extent that he ran away after taking all his money and whatever money they had earned by taking yoga classes. And not only that, he was also, and he started his own organization, and he started spreading bad name for the master. But even then, look at the compassion of Yogananda. He always used to write to Dhirananda, and lovingly. In fact, he always used to send the box of mangoes to him, which he used to return unopened, because he was in a way hating master. But still he writes, Yogananda writes that Dhirananda will be liberated in 3 lifetimes. So just imagine that despite doing so much of, creating so much of bad karma for himself, betraying his own guru and spreading bad name and doing, what not, this great master was helping his disciple to overcome his karma, and he still said that he will be free in 3 lifetimes. Imagine to what degree a great master can go to help his disciple. And there is another story. In this case, it was a story of Indian saint. His name was Sadhu Haridas. And Sadhu Haridas was, as we remember, a very great saint. In fact, he had a lot of great siddhis. He used to walk on water, as they say, and he had many disciples. He was running his organization. And as it happened that this man also fell from his spiritual realization, and he went with a woman, and started living with her. And then after few years, he realized that he made a mistake, and he came back to his disciples and said, I'm so sorry that I made a mistake, and but that was not the path which I wanted to live, and please forgive me, and now I have realized my mistake and I want to live for God. And Yogananda said that Sadhu Haridas found liberation in the same lifetime. In fact, when he shared this story with one of his disciples, this lady asked Master, Sir, is it not that when a great soul falls from his spiritual path, that God gives them greater punishment because they have fallen from such a great height? Master said, no, God is not a tyrant. And he knows that, yes, when the child has fallen and after straying away, he again comes back and calls God, he always forgives his children. And it is like, if you have eaten good cheese and later on you again start eating stale cheese, sooner or later you will realize the mistake, and you will not be able to forget the good cheese, and you will say that, yes, I want the good nectar and the cheese, and you will come back. And that is how these saints and God operate, that they never look at our fault. And if sometimes it is this, the path can become long, not because we have made mistakes, because mistakes will happen through all of us, but because the disciple creates a barrier in his own shame and guilt, that I have committed these mistakes and my Guru will not forgive me. And that is why, Guruji, Yogananda ji was always reminding everybody that never look at your faults. What are your faults? He used to say, faults are nothing but errors of judgment. And errors of judgment are what? They are like darkness. But when you focus on light, because God is nothing, one aspect of God, as we know, is light. And when you look into the light, when you focus on that light, how can darkness and light remain together at the same time? Even if the darkness as faults is of millions of incarnations, or it is of whatever intensity, but the moment you come into the light, it just vanishes as if it was never there. So this is exactly, friends, the purpose of this sharing of this conversation is that let us not create this distance between God and our own selves. My understanding is that often the path becomes long because we create this barrier. And this is another story, which is coming to my mind here, is by Naya Swami Devi ji. And she, as you know, that she's our worldwide spiritual director along with Swami Jyotish ji. And in her younger days, as she was preparing for one of her classes, and she was going there to take this class, she was thinking that, yes, she has prepared her talk and she would be sharing this information with all the students in the class. But as she went there, she said she realized that the people sitting in the class were all angels, and they didn't know that, and they didn't believe in themselves. And her job was to convince them and make them understand that how beautiful God has made them and how much God loves them. And that is the main role and purpose of any spiritual teacher, because through this forum and through this channel, my job is that wherever you are sitting, don't go into this guilt and think about the faults. See yourself as a unique creation of God. And God loves you the same way as He loves any great master, whether he was Buddha or Krishna or Nanak or Kabir. And He's everywhere, and He wants to reach us. He can reach us at any point of time. The only thing which is required is to go to Him and tell Him, Sir, I love you. God, I love you. You have created me. And you will see that in that instant the barrier drops. And when we go to Him with full concentration, with full focus of our mind, because that is what will be required, because in fact, what is the essence of yoga practice? Essence of yoga practice, as we say, is meditation. And meditation is nothing but one pointed concentration on God, or one of His aspects, or one of His prophets. And what do we mean by one pointed concentration? It means that we have to bring intensity into our meditation, intensity to an extent where we are not getting distracted by any of the thoughts, and we are fully focused on the aspect of God and also or one of his prophets. And in that process, the samayama sooner or later is going to happen. And with that samayama, as we see that the object, observer, and the act of observation will become one, and in that process we realize that God is you and God is playing this role through all of us, and there is no separation. In fact, there is a beautiful story which Master used to share with everybody, and this was a story of this saint, who had a disciple, and this disciple was one day not paying attention to the saint, what saint was teaching, and saint asked this disciple, son, I see that you are not focusing on my words. Where are you right now? And this disciple said, sir, you have given me a buffalo, so I was walking with the buffalo in the garden. And so saint said, okay, no worries, son, you can let us defer our classes for the time being. You can stay with your buffalo. In fact, he gave him one room that, okay, you stay in the thoughts of buffalo in that room, and we will come to the teachings later on. And in the evening, he again knocked at the door and asked this disciple, son, what are you doing? And he said, sir, I am grazing with my buffalo. Should I come out for the classes? He said, no, son, stay with your buffalo. And again, next day, the master, the saint again came and knocked at the door, and he asked him, son, what are you doing? And he said, master, I am now leaning on the buffalo and I am sleeping on my buffalo. Should I come out now? He said, no, there is no need. Just continue what you are doing. And again, next day, he knocked at the door of this disciple and he said, son, what are you doing? And he said, sir, he said something, but later on he said, when he knocked, he said, what are you doing? He said, who are you? And he was in a very big voice that, who are you and what are you doing? He said, I am the buffalo. And he was in a very husky voice, and he said, and shall I come out? He said, and at that point, the saint said, yes, you can come out now, because this disciple was saying that, no, I have big horns. He said, no, you can now come out. And he opened the door and brought this disciple from that state in which he became the buffalo. His concentration was so strong. He was feeling that he was becoming one with his object. And later on, he told this disciple that this is how you need to concentrate. That the depth of concentration, that intensity should become so intense that you become that object on which you are concentrating. And if you will concentrate with the same intensity on God, you will become God, or you will realize that God is you and there is no separation. So friends, with that story, I would like to just take your leave and wish you a very happy new year. But at the same time, I would say that whenever this thought comes to your mind that probably, God does not love me, or maybe Guruji has forsaken me, please do not allow this thought to run in your mind, because that is the greatest victory of the delusion. And Master used to tell that, always remember that, pray to Divine Mother with this thought that, Mother, whether naughty or good, I am your child. Please accept me. And you will see that Divine Mother will always accept us if we go to her as a loving child and tell her that, I need your love and I love you. And in that instant, in that intense concentration, you will see that you are already that. Joy to you.